Welcome everybody, and welcome to this ADF Candidate Forum, which thanks to the Victorian Farmers Federation for providing the platform. Today I'll be mediating the forum. My name is Mark Billing and I'm President of the United Dairy Farmers of Victoria. So as we know, we have three candidates vying for one position on the ADF Board, and that election, the voting has actually started already. So we wanted to provide a platform for farmers within Victoria and more broadly through the other states. So welcome everyone that's joined us so far today. So the format today will be fairly strict in that we've only got an hour. So I'll run through the rules of engagement briefly. I'll ask each of the candidates to have 5 minutes, just in an open statement. And then we have 3 questions that the candidates already have, and they'll have 3 minutes each candidate to answer those 3 questions, and then we'll move on to questions from the audience. So the rules of engagement basically is that we just ask the candidates to be always respectful, not talking over each other, and I would prefer if there was no personal attacks. So because of the short time frame, we're going to be adhering to fairly strict timing with the answers, and I'll be getting an indication when each candidate has 30 seconds left of their timing. So with that, we will start off in alphabetical order, and I've got Rick down. Sorry, no, I haven't. I've got Glenn Britnell down. So Glenn, your 5 minutes starts for your opening statement. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, for your introduction there, and it's a pleasure to be part of this. Actually, I'm looking forward to it. As a dairy farmer, I think it's always good to have a good contest for the industry and the leadership roles that are on offer. So I've, as a dairy farmer for around 25 years, I've watched the decline of dairy farmers and their communities. And so now I would like to take a leading role in the ADF board to support the board and bring grassroots views to the table on how dairy farmers are feeling about their directions going forward. So it's one of the things that I feel that as an industry, we do need to always have fresh blood in there and support one another. And that's my key mantra, is to support. It's not me that's can lead and change everything that's already being done by good people that have already put themselves forward. So really it's what we see now is an industry that's in decline, and we need to be able to put the brakes on it. So really that's where I stand and run with it all, for everyone that's interested in why I'm running. So thanks, Mark, and everyone on that. So I've pretty much finished with my vision, I suppose you could say.
Great, thanks. Thanks for that, Glenn. So as I said it alphabetically, we'll move on to Rick now. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Mark, and good afternoon, everybody. For those I haven't met, I am Rick Gladigau. I am a dairy farmer in Adelaide Hills, and I'm also the current president of Australian Dairy Farmers. First of all, thanks VFF UDV for providing the platform today, and also thanks to Glenn and Ian as well for putting your hands up for this nomination process as well. So I'm nearing the end of my first 3 years on the ADF board and have re-nominated for a second 3-year term. I grew up on a dairy farm in Adelaide Hills, and like most kids, I was involved in the farm right from a young age. I have my own dairy now in the Adelaide Hills that I bought when I was 27, as I was share farming on my parents' dairy farm at the time. They encouraged me to go out and have a go on my own, and you can take that as you want. There was a bit of a push there probably as well. So that was 30 years ago. So over that 30 years, I've developed my farm, I've leased more land, and I've got married, built a house, and now have 3 adult children as well. I've always had an interest in technology and seeing how others farm, and if there are learnings that I can use on my own farm. I've been involved in our local discussion group for numerous years as well. So I've changed the way that I do things over the years to find what works best for me and to benchmark myself on myself. I've recently become a director of our own home farm now with my dad and my brother as we move through a succession plan on that farm as well, on that dairy. I struggle to just be sitting on a board or a committee without taking a more active part in running the organisation. I usually find myself in chair or deputy roles because usually I would get a bit outspoken, and as I always want to know more on how things are being run and how I can contribute to how it's being run. I've been involved in the dairy post-farm gate for close to 40 years through being part of a dairy cooperative. Being a water with dairy farmers, and through that journey, I ended up being a director on the board of DFMC. As well as that, I've been a member. Been a member for SADA for numerous years. But I joined the board, and probably since the late 90s. But I joined the board in 2007, and up until recently, so that was about 14 years on SADA, and the last few I was actually the treasurer. 6 years ago, I had to make a decision whether I was going to stay in dairying or get out due to the milk price. So I decided I needed to find a new home. And so I approached many local processors, smaller processors, and eventually set up a direct supply to the company I currently supply, which is Udder Delights, which at the time was a small local family-owned cheese company. I was their first farm direct supplier, I should say, for normal milk. They were getting organic milk previously. And now over those 6 years since I've started that, there are now 8 local suppliers who now supply Udder Delights, and a couple of those are people who've actually started dairying in the region to do exactly that, all based off of my supply setup. So my first 3 years on the ADF board, I've certainly learned a lot, and especially this past year as being the president. Some of the key events during this time has been the launch of the Australian Dairy Plan, which was just over 2 years ago, the Mandatory Code of Conduct, and this year we had our first review of such. We did the dairy levy poll this year. We had the COVID issues and advocating for dairy to be an essential service so that we could all continue to milk cows and have that milk processed. We've had biosecurity issues this year with FMD and LSD, and certainly been part of better industry awareness and lobbying of the government for better border security. Did the 22 federal election platform, when we come out with that already in December 21, and one of the first to do so, and we certainly saw and achieved some results from what we were advocating for, and we did again now in the recent budget. Just recently, we've gone through the process of appointing a new CEO, which I led that panel, and a new CEO in Stephen Sheridan, with a unanimous decision by the board for Stephen to be appointed. So also we did the negotiation then with Stephen on the new CEO contract. And now just recently, we've also just established the ADF Murray-Darling Basin Subcommittee so that dairy will have a united voice from all affected states when the review of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan takes place. So these are just a few of the achievements during my current tenure, my last 3 years. But one of the biggest issues for ADF is our funding going forward, and relying on your farmer levies through the SDFOs is one of the big parts of how we are currently funded. But that needs to change, as we can't keep relying on that income. So I've certainly been in discussions with past CEOs and the current CEO and the board on ways that we can find new funding streams into ADF, because advocacy doesn't have a compulsory levy, and we need to be able to keep funding, be able to do the work on behalf of farmers. One of my key parts is that I'd like to see stability in ADF board. In my 3 years, I am actually currently the longest serving director on ADF, and we've only got 5 directors, and 3 of those were actually appointed last year. So stability to me is a big key to how ADF can continue to function. And every time we have, especially last year with a number of new directors, it creates a bit of a lag while those directors get their head around how the organisation operates, who our stakeholders are, etc. For me, but to close, is that I don't do this role for me. I do this role for everybody else, so that everybody else can be a dairy farmer like me. So So I would really appreciate everybody's support that for me to be able to continue on the ADF board going forward, and that we can continue to work as ADF board for the benefit of all dairy farmers in Australia. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And now moving on to Ian.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I want to acknowledge that Glenn and Rick's sincere efforts in running in this election. We all want what is best for the Australian dairy industry. I also want to acknowledge that many farmers are currently dealing with floods and extremely wet conditions. As an industry, we need to work together and with government on long-term recovery efforts. I have been dairying in Cobden, Western Victoria for the past 15 years, where I grew up. I am also a development economist who has had a 40-year career in international aid, including working for the World Bank. We supply a cooperative supply company. As an industry, we need to establish the right framework to deal with the extensive range of issues of great importance to us, many of which are recurring in nature and require sustained advocacy efforts, which are currently underfunded. Clearly, the dairy industry is the major tipping point as the national milk pool collapses by 3% per year, and it is at potential catastrophic declines in other parts, including Queensland and northern New South Wales. The milk pool is simply not tracking the optimistic vision of the 3% growth embodied in the dairy plan. Paradoxically, in recent times, we have had relatively good milk prices, reasonable seasons, except for fires and patches of drought and floods, I mean, in the last couple of years, but farmers are leaving in significant numbers, with many farms being converted to alternate uses. This is simply not good for the industry. Farmers also now face significant input costs, fertilizer, grain, and energy, and have a significant shortage of labour. ADF has done some good work in this space, but more needs to be done. Competition issues, particularly the role of supermarket monopoly power over processors and farmers on the non-traded element of dairy, that is fresh milk, as also acknowledged by the ACCC, means farmers get low milk farm gate prices. We need to look at these issues very seriously. Additionally, industry commitment to net zero by 2050, social license to operate issues around animal health, public health, and dairy beef, and the commitment of government to join the global methane reduction effort will lead to additional cost impositions and regulatory burdens on farmers and uncertain cash benefits. Concerns that farmers are not being consulted on these issues are entirely reasonable, and the industry needs to redress this gap. ADF needs to work to ensure consultation of these issues with farmers and carefully focus on the issues while keeping farm profitability top of mind. Notwithstanding these issues, the dairy industry can have a very profitable future. Many farmers are profitable and adopt strategies or farming systems which can deal with milk price, input cost, and seasonal volatility. A better understanding of these systems can also provide a route for young farmers to enter the industry. Dairy leaders started the dairy plan process by indicating that the existing advocacy arrangements and structure were not fit for purpose and were broken. No discernible progress on this very important set of issues on advocacy reform has been made by dairy leaders. It is, in my view, critically important that the industry builds consensus on where to go with this reform. Massive farmers' funds have been expended on this with nothing to show for it. Significantly, the work has been kept secret by dairy leaders, and we farmers are not being consulted. This has to change. I note that Rick questions whether there was appetite amongst the board and the industry to generally initiate the changes needed for structural reform. The dairy plan consultation process and my discussions with farmers as I canvass for this position indicates that there is a real appetite for the reforms. Thank you.
Well done, Ian. You just scraped in under the 5 minutes, so thank you for that. So that concludes the start of the formal introductions of each of the candidates. So what I did is I sent out for each candidate 3 sort of broad-ranging questions, and each candidate now will have 3 minutes to answer each of those questions. So I've changed the order this time for answers. So for Rick, to start off, what do you see is the biggest issue for the Australian dairy industry?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Well, as I sort of pointed out in what had been achieved in the last 3 years, there's plenty of issues that come across the ADF table. It makes it really hard for me to actually focus on what I consider is what is the big issue. But I feel there is a lack of confidence in the industry, and a large part of that is due to the lack of labour. Farmers are doing long hours, and some recently have had the extra burdens of flooding and or wet weather. Some are getting on in age, a bit like me, and with no family to take over and feeling a bit worn out. When we see large dairies closing down because they can't find staff, this becomes a big concern for industry. Smaller farms just sell up due to good land prices and retire and move to beef or whatever. And I've seen that a lot around my region. The other part to labour is the bookwork and keeping up with all the IR laws. Wages, super, sick leave, holiday pay, and now we also have domestic violence leave added to the list, which ADF was not a supporter as there weren't enough facts on the table of how it could work. It makes it tough for smaller farms as well to keep abreast and comply with all the regulations. ADF has been working in this area with preference treatment to get overseas visa workers approved, and as well as supporting training in increasing in tertiary funding for skills development. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Rick. So, Ian, same question. What do you see is the biggest issue for the Australian dairy industry?
Thank you. The dairy industry needs a robust advocacy capacity which can engage with government and the community and the industry itself. This to me needs to be evidence-based. This requires resources and professional staff and an engagement strategy with farmers, a two-way flow, which ensures accountability to farmers and branches across the nation. The current advocacy structure is clearly not working. It is totally underfunded, and the sustained drop in membership of state bodies, particularly in Victoria, compounds the risk to the current advocacy capacity of the industry. This also precludes enhanced advocacy capacity, which is clearly needed by the dairy industry at a time the mounting challenges to farm profitability, cost structures, and increased regulatory burdens are being imposed by both government and by the industry itself. There is also concern and skepticism amongst farmers, particularly as reflected in the dairy levy poll, about the accountability, transparency of benefits being derived from DA. For my part, I believe we need a high-performing and more accountable DA, which clearly demonstrates its short, medium, and longer-term benefits to profitable farms. The proposal outlined below would help to achieve this objective. We need to, in our view, ensure DA subjects its forward 5-year program of work, almost 400 million, to an independent technical and economic evaluation of its contributions to farm profitability managed by the ADF and which is made public. In summary, one constructive option on restructuring would be as follows. All dairy farmers become eligible to join ADF. State dairy farmers elect representatives to ADF say president and vice president, with state voting rights equivalent to the milk pool, as at present with the National Council, but it would disappear. At least 2 independent directors with strong government and relevant industry skills. In constructing this would ensure a chain of command and accountability back to state organisations, regions and branches.
30 seconds, Ian.
The board would have a strong strategic role in setting priorities as a part of, for DA as a Part B member. One more radical option would be the ADF to become a board of DA as well. There could be significant decentralisation of RDPs and accountability to regional levy payers. The revised ADF structure would need to establish state level bodies to deal with state level issues.
Ian, I'll just have to call time, mate. So
Yep.
if you've got time at the end, you can come back to finish that off. Look back to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. To Glenn, same question. What do you see is the biggest issue for the Australian dairy industry?
Thanks, Mark, for that. What I see as the biggest issues is we're actually losing more dairy farms and farmers out of the industry. Now, we can talk about a lot of the other things that are there at the moment, but they seem to be what people are talking about a lot. And how do we stop the flow of that happening? It obviously takes a lot of effort to try and turn that around, but when we've got influences like supermarkets and government that we have to lobby all the time, that's making it difficult for us as a lobbying group to work towards making some changes there, or at least having something that we can try and work for with the dairy farmers that are still left. And that's, where do we get those new ones coming in? That's another question to the situation. As Rick said about Labor, it's a big thing, and a lot of people talk about that are on my travels that I'm listening to all the time. So there's no silver bullet to the scenarios, but at least we can try and make sure that everyone's voices are heard on these sorts of things to be able to work as a team. And that's really what we are there as to do, to try and stem that flow of people leaving. Anyway, that's me. Thank you, Mark.
Good on you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. So moving to the second question now, and I'll get Ian to answer this one first. If elected, what do you see are the key things that you bring to the table?
I believe I have a strong understanding of dairy issues and the ability to carefully listen to farmer views, together with the capacity to bridge the necessary connections between on-the-ground realities of farmer needs and experience to the policy space needed to get things done in the advocacy space. My 40 years plus experience in developing policies and projects and programs to achieve agreed objectives and building consensus on agreed objectives, working at the highest level of government in many countries as the international development economist, brings a different and positive set of skills to the tasks that confront the industry and ADF. This experience included many years working at the World Bank as a staff member and in a consulting capacity with many aid agencies. I have extensive experience in working in teams and defining their terms of reference, putting teams together with diverse skills required to deal with the task at hand, chairing and managing teams to achieve positive outcomes. I have sat on company boards ranging from oil palm rubber plantations, a road company, and I've also many years of experience on AIDS care and AIDS care board and vulnerable legacy. I have managed many major projects, including reconstructing the health system in East Timor and governance and program reforms for the social sectors in Pakistan, a $10 billion program which included putting the financing package together. I would bring a wealth of experience, government and commitments to transparency and accountability to the ADF board table. To this end, I seek to work with the ADF Board, National Council and state bodies to further the strategic interests of dairy farmers, to drive and build consensus for structural reforms in a way that unifies dairy farmers and ensures advocacy capacity is built into a sustainable structure. This I will do for the common interest of all dairy farmers in Australia, driving for profitability and beneficial policy outcomes. Ideally, candidates of the board should have boardroom experience and be able to work collectively with other boards, be able to work with partners and government.
All right, you've still got 30 seconds, Ian.
Yeah, right. And be a leader of staff at ADF, but respect and not blur the line between board and staff. Understand how processes in the industry and with government work, and thus be able to identify and frame the issues that the ADF can successfully influence. Always be honest, ethical, transparent, and accountable to farmers. Most importantly, I commit to working as a team member to build advocacy capacity in the process, and with strong efforts, commitment to transparency and accountability to farmers.
That's fine. Thanks, Ian. All righty. So to Glenn, same question, Glenn. If elected, what do you see are the key things that you bring to the table?
Firstly, for myself, I believe that I can bring honesty, and for bringing people on board to try and help, like I'm talking about dairy farmers, bringing them forward with their ideas that I can also push forward to better where the direction we're actually taking. So finding solutions is always about using networks, and I think that's a big thing. I have a reasonable network of political understanding and where the corridors might be. So I think that's something that I could utilise in taking to the board. And obviously working as a team with a team of people is something that really strives to try and improve the industry, at least stem the flow of the issues that we've got going on at the moment. And so that's where I see it at this point, Mark.
Good on you. Thanks, Glenn. To Rick, again, if elected, what do you see are the key things that you bring to the table?
Thanks, Mark. So over my last 3 years, I believe I've brought honesty, integrity, experience and passion to the ADF board over that time. I'm certainly a strategic thinker that listens to both sides of a debate, even if I already have an opinion. Having been on the SADA board for over 14 years, it taught me how to work with skilled professionals and how to work with government and ministers, industry stakeholders and farmers. I believe this all started when I was a ward rep at Dairy Farmers Cooperative and worked my way up through that board as well. My time on these boards has helped me gain a far better understanding of dairy around Australia and not just my own little patch, and working with key people, including dairy farmers. The ADF board is a governance board and needs to deal with the financials as well as be aware and manage the risks of the organisation. I am a firm believer in good governance and that constitutions are developed for a reason, to lay the rules that the organisation must operate under. I've learnt to be a better listener over the last few years and listen to people's opinions and let them speak, not cut them off. People like the opportunity that they've had a chance to speak and someone has listened to them. That doesn't mean that I do what people say, as long as I can justify and explain why I haven't. I also work well with the board, as I have over the last 3 years, even in a changing board. And also I have committed to work well with the staff and that we have achieved results. I'm certainly about having stability on the board. As I said, I'm the longest person to serve and I've only done 3 years currently. And that's a key to achieving results, is some stability at that board level as well. Yeah, so that's basically, I have a passion and I have experience to be part of the organisation and lead on behalf of farmers.
Good on you. Thanks, Rick. So to Ian, no, sorry, yes. I'll get myself sorted out here. So that's the first two questions done. We're into our third one. So to Glenn, what is your vision for the Australian dairy industry?
Thanks, Mark. It would be my vision. It wouldn't be my vision, sorry, alone for the dairy industry. It's what dairy farmers' vision is. We need grassroots dairy farmers to drive the vision, and only then can we create a direction for the industry. So it seems that we need to make sure that we're consulting all those people that are left there still to try and put forward solutions. And I love being positive about what direction, or is there a negative? When there's a negative, what's the positives within that? And can we find solutions? Because it just, for me, I love working with teams of people, and I have done in the past with my own farming enterprise as it's been going along, but we're in a small, we are a small industry in a big pond, and we need to try and keep it stable going forward. Thanks for that, Mark.
Thanks, Glenn. So to Rick, Rick, what is your vision for the Australian dairy industry?
So when I stood 3 years ago, I spoke about unity and collaboration of the industry. And I still believe that this is a key for us to be able to move forward. We've seen over the last few years with COVID and floods and fires, how industry can pull together, referred to by some as seeing the best of industry. I think we still need to be far better collaboration yet, especially between RDPs and SDFOs, and even SDFOs and SDFOs, and the industry rep bodies and industry service bodies, as in ADF and DA. As farmers want a best bang for buck. We can't expect farmers to continually to dip into their pockets to fork out the hard earned if we as industry bodies can't show that we can managing those levies to leverage the best return and results. The other issue, as I've raised earlier, is to achieve a better funded advocacy and policy organisation, including our SDFOs. We can't continue or expect to continue to perform our role on a shoestring budget. I've had discussions with our past and present CEO on some of those options that we may be able to achieve this. We also need, one of the biggest concerns is to increase Australia's milk production. I am concerned where we are heading and that what we may look like if this continues. There are so many pieces to this puzzle though to be able to make this happen, and that's why we need a well-resourced ADF. We have our Southeast Asian neighbours at our doorstep with huge potential for dairy, Australian dairy. But we need to build confidence in the industry through developing relationships between our processors and farmers for a secure farm gate, profitable milk price for multiple years. The processors can then go with confidence to grow value and markets plus returns. We need win-wins across the supply chain. And as I said earlier, unity and collaboration is needed to be able to build confidence. The final ones are, we need to be able to keep reducing red tape and paperwork. Farmers want to be farming, not filling out papers and fighting just to be able to build a fence. And finally is, we need to improve the city view of farming. We can't be dictated to by the city telling us how to farm, how to manage the climate or our animals. We need to show them that we do care, and it's our business that relies on it.
Good on you. Thanks, Rick. And finally to Ian, what is your vision for the Australian dairy industry?
Thank you. Look, we need an industry that is profitable, using farming systems that are agile and able to adjust and maintain profitability in the face of the very significant volatilities that face farm businesses. I strongly believe the industry can and will have a profitable future. However, the industry must organise to respond to the challenges it faces. Specifically, the industry needs to be able to adjust and respond to the very significant farm gate price volatility that could be expected in the future, input cost volatility such as fertiliser, energy, grain, fodder costs, and some arising from international events and others from domestic policy developments. They have to deal with seasonal variations and extreme weather events, which are increasing. Labour supply constraints as policy evolves to deal with the issue. There's a cluster of issues around the dairy industry as well as government to achieve net zero by 2050, including methane reduction targets being discussed. And these will all put pressure on costs and regulatory burden on farm businesses. The wide range of social license to operate issues coming down the pike, ranging from animal welfare, ethical treatment of animals, and issues including bobby calves, dehorning, calf rearing, and monitoring of quality on farms and consequent reporting requirements are all coming. The dairy industry needs to form a compact with the community and government that demonstrates that the industry is responding reasonably to these issues. That is, that we are an industry that is doing the right thing and it is doing all it can to maintain the profitable and ethical production of quality and reliable food. On the other hand, every point listed has its own complexities for the community, farmers, and government. Farmers need strong advocacy to respond to their interests to this bewildering array of issues. ADF has to be in the lead here. We also need strong and accountable RD&E support from Dairy Australia. But it's clear farmers are not sure that they are getting this from DA given the results of the levy poll.
30 seconds, Ian.
This is why farmers have clearly signalled that reform and advocacy industry structure, as I have discussed, is a clear progress. Yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you, Ian. Well, that sort of finishes up the structured part. We've got a couple of questions popped through there, so I'll summarise one of them. One of them is a direct question to an individual. If we've got time, we'll come back to that one. But there's one here for each of you, and I'll just summarise it the best way that I can. It's talking about the volatility within our industry. And in that volatility, there's animal rights activism, climate change issues that we have to grapple with each day as dairy farmers. So the question is, how do each of you propose volatility could be tackled to make our industry more attractive to stay in and have it grow, looking for a bigger picture, not just what we already know? So with that, I might throw to Glenn first.
Thanks, Mark, for that. It's one of the situations that I'm constantly hearing about issues of animal rights, the right to farm, things like that. People have actually brought up more of those comments to me, and I think that if we've got the ability to communicate with our politicians and put forward the solutions that we already have in place, a lot of it's already there, but it's just we need support of each farmer to make sure that they're playing their role in it too, and they feel valued, that they're supported if somebody does come in to attack their situation of their right to farm. So I think it's not just individuals, it's the whole industry needs to be supportive, and every farmer that we do still have there can help in some way, shape or form. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Glenn. And Ian, I'll move to you next. What's your thoughts around volatility in the industry?
I've made some observations about volatility. It's clearly the farming systems that are being adopted have to be able to deal with these issues, and advocacy has to deal with the issues that significantly affect volatility. It's my view that farmers have not been adequately consulted on many of these issues. The Dairy Sustainability Committee advises the AIDC and the industry on carbon and climate change and social license to operate issues. I have been struck that in the last 12 months, the issue has been raised, suddenly realizing they made all these commitments. Now they need to engage with farmers, and farmers need to be able to do things for them to meet their commitments. And they're trying to work out how the engagement works with farmers. And this is part of the problem of dealing with the cost structures that contribute to the volatility and the regulatory burden. On the other hand, we do have to recognise that as a farming business operating in an international environment, there are many risks and volatility issues that we as an industry don't control, and government doesn't control, as in what's happened to fertiliser prices. It was hardly anyone's fault in Australia that Russia invaded Ukraine. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Rick, so your thoughts around volatility?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's always an interesting question, and this is never going to go away about volatility of the industry, and there's so many different facets to it. But one thing that we have done, and this is working with Dairy Australia and the work that they do as well, is that we need to lead from the front. And we need to promote what we have done. And as we did recently about greenhouse gas emissions, etc., we showed what the industry's done voluntarily over the last 40 odd years as it is. It's not saying that we need to stop at that, but we need to prove that we don't shirk from responsibilities and that we're willing to do what we need to improve. One of those other issues has been the bobby calf issue, and that's certainly it's been front and centre of the animal rights people, and we're probably only one media piece away from possible disaster. But we've shown that we're not going to shirk away from it, that we've put a task force together, we've discussed the issue, and it's not an easy issue to fix. That certainly has been reflected, and that's right across the supply chain on that one. So, but it's showing that we're going to work through the issue. We're going to start putting some policy in place, and work to improve, whether we can achieve a value-added market in that regard. So for industry, it's not to hide behind our weaknesses. It's to show that yes, we get it, and we're willing to work and show that we are making changes, we are doing things, but we can still improve to get better at what we do as well.
Good, thanks. I think all three have answered that question. So one other quick one here is all three have mentioned membership engagement. I'd be interested to know how you see membership engagement going forward for ADF. And Ian, I might come to you first on that one.
Okay. Well, first of all, the proposals that along the lines that I'm advocating for discussion and dialogue with the industry is that dairy farmers become direct members of ADF, and that there is a direct connection between what ADF is doing in very important areas that happen at the federation level, which farmers only have a direct, indirect connection to, but really control a significant part of the environment within which they work, including monopoly issues, competition, trade, and the whole set of those issues. And ultimately, some of the coming through the trade issues will come the pressures around social license to operate issues as we move forward. It just seems to me that that is an important set of issues which we have to deal with. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Ian. Rick?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question, and especially from ADF, given our limited resources, is how do we communicate back to farmers? So, I mean, we do our media releases, we do our website, we do social media. We think we're targeting everybody. Everybody's finding out, but we still find there's still weaknesses in there that we're not. But it's who we are. You know, we are a representative body, and that we need to have that farmer engagement. And for ADF, it needs to make sure that we're getting people involved in PAGs. We've got people involved in in different task forces. And we need to keep that line of communication open, and that line of communication is what's coming also back through the SDFOs, back through National Council, then back to ADF as well. So we need everything to sort of align, and that people are happy to make a point, but making sure that they're going through the right channels. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to reform, direct memberships, etc., that's always a possibility. That also creates another level of work for ADF of have we got the staffing, etc., to be able to manage that as well. But on our current structure, I think we probably still need to tidy up our communication back to members. I'm not for a newsletter every week coming from a CEO or every 2 weeks or whatever, but we need to make sure that as the work that we're doing is getting communicated back down the channel, that everybody is aware what's going on and comfortable that they're paying a levy through an SDFO to ADF and they're seeing results for it.
Yep, thank you, Rick. Glenn?
As what I'm hearing on the ground when I go around and talk to dairy farmers, they find it, and this is for Victoria at this point in time that I'm talking about here, they're finding it incredibly difficult to work out why, if they're a part of Victorian Farmers Federation, that they don't automatically go straight across to the ADF and having to fill out another form. And obviously there's some things that could be sorted out there to make that a direct situation so that everyone doesn't have to duplicate everything, because that seems to me one of the learnings that I've had moving around, that that's one of the major problem for the industry going forward, that we duplicate a lot of information out there, and as dairy farmers we don't have that time to spend always to be thinking, oh God, do I have to do that again, sort of thing. So yeah, that's just what I'm finding out on the ground. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. So I've got a couple more questions coming in. So this one is around how do we market the Australian dairy industry to international investors in our industry, particularly Asian interests? So Ian, I might go to you again first on this one.
I think one of the key issues here is around the issues of the quality and the wholesomeness and the quality of Australian production and production systems, and conveying that to the world that we are following best practice. And by and large, there's no doubt that the Australian industry is very high in the standards that it has. One of the issues I alluded to was that increasing pressures will come on farmers to document how that is happening so that people can argue those cases, the major corporations and so on that are actually doing the trade and selling the commodities. But I think it's very important also that we have if we're focusing on an export program, that it's very hard in a declining industry to be very rosy about where to go. We need to turn the industry around so that we are, in fact, able to export more and have the capacity to do it. Because one of the real issues for Indonesia and Pakistan and other countries that will become an India will be the reliability of our supply in aggregate. And that will be a constraint in what we can do.
Good, thanks, Ian. Glenn, we'll go to you next. You're on, Glenn. Glenn, sorry.
Yeah, can you just recap that question for me again, Mark?
Yeah. So how do we market the Australian dairying industry to international investors in our industry, and particularly the focus on Asian investors?
That's sort of not an easy thing when we've got a marketplace at the moment that's hasn't got the milk to be able to deal with new markets constantly, unless of course they're high valued markets for overseas. So we're still in a bit of a struggle there. If we think we're going to take on more export markets, we've got to do it for the right price, obviously, for people to for those countries to invest back in our direction. They do need stability, and through the company that I supply, they have a direct link to Indonesia, and they just want stability. And if they're going to see that it's worthwhile investing more in infrastructure, I should say, into the industry, that they need a return on it. And if we're struggling to fill our own domestic needs, we don't have any way forward at this point in time. That's the way I look at it. We can say that it's there, but it's only short term, and people want long term if they're investors.
Thanks, Glenn. To you, Rick.
Yeah, probably the first concern here is our shrinking milk pool, and so being able to actually capture some of these markets. But having just returned from a short trip to Thailand and meeting some dairy representatives there, as in processors, etc., part of that was to find out why would they want to buy Australian dairy, because New Zealand is certainly a big competitor for us into that Southeast Asian market. So we can't just rely on the clean green image of Australia, which we've promoted for years beforehand. So what stood out was they want quality, and that's how they see Australian dairy, as quality. So part of that, we need to also keep showing that we are producing that quality, that we have industry world best standards and how we produce our milk as well. But the other side is that while we've developed the Chinese market, and China is certainly our biggest biggest country that we export to, I certainly see a massive possibility of growing into these Southeast Asian markets, the Thailand, the Malaysia, the South Korea, the Vietnams. But so part of that comes down to what our tariffs are there to be able to actually do that. Currently, Thailand is probably our best country to get into. So I think there is, and dare I say, and this is a bit, putting it out there, is that there's actually a possibility that Australian dairy could turn out like seafood, where these countries are actually our better returns than what our domestic returns are. These guys are looking for Australian dairy. They're looking for quality. They're looking for ingredients. They're growing a cheese market, etc. So I think there's a huge avenue for us to be able to grow there, and I believe there's actually other avenues for Australian as dairy actually into there as well, that we might be able to also ride in it as well. So, but we need to be able to build those relationships, and so we've just started doing that now that the COVID issue sort of made it get us to travel. But building those relationships with these countries who really do want us. And dare I say, I'd be moving milk away from China and developing these ones tomorrow if I had the say. So, and we've worked into India as well, and that's not going to be a big one for us, but there are certain prospects into that market as well. But I think our biggest respect to us then is actually what the EU is still trying to do with that free trade agreement back to Australia. So on some of these geographical indicator names. Thanks, Mark.
Good on you, Rick. We've got a couple more questions there, but it takes us about 10 minutes to do a round, and I might draw a line under it there now, and I would say that there's those that have posed questions there, if they want to contact the delegates directly, I'm sure the delegates would be happy to have a chat to you about your questions there. So with that, we've got 3 minutes left, just time enough for me to wrap up. So firstly, thank you to all the candidates for their time today, and we've had a reasonable amount of attendees online as well, and from right across the country. So thank you for those for hopping on today. Thanks again to VFF for providing the platform for us today, and doing a bit of the back office work. Peter Costello sitting there, and Charles Everest, thank you very much for your support there. Thank you for the spirit in which the discussions were held today. I think it's projected your platforms quite well today as well. So just a couple of reminders. Voting is live now through Vero, and ADF members would have received an email with their login details to do the voting. And voting closes at November the 21st at 10:30 a.m. And the AGM for ADF, all these acronyms, great thing in dairy, is Thursday the 24th of November is the AGM. So with that, with a minute or two left, I'll wrap up, and I'll just point out with the grass in the background, I'm actually outside and I'm standing up in the mud. It's raining again, but we're nowhere near as bad off as some others. So our thoughts to those that are in the flood areas and having to deal with way too much water, and to the South Australians online, it's coming your way, guys. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. Hopefully for those that have been looking at this session, have provided some information in how you're going to vote. So once again, thanks very much.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone also. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank you, Mark, for putting this together along with the rest of the VFF team. So thank you to you also.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yep. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, VFF. Thanks, Ian and Glenn.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Charles. We'll close it.